Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service, jbiztechvalley.com. As you can see here, columnist for the Jewish Press.
I'm having a lot of fun doing all of that, and I write my column Albany Beat about how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. And one person who does relate to the Jewish community very well is our first guest, Jim Tedisco, Assemblyman. He's currently the Assemblyman from Glenville and covers Schenectady.
112th Assembly District.
112th Assembly District, yada, yada, yada.
I like to say all good things emanate from the 112th Assembly District.
Well, that could be, considering you're the Assemblyman and soon to be State Senator.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Oh,
don't jinx me now.
Oh, come on.
We always say in Jewish, Im Yirtz Hashem, which means if God wants.
That's right.
You have to have God's help for everything.
And I should say welcome back to the Jewish View, because you've been on here before, which means we treated you nicely enough where you wanted to come back.
Well, I even come back when they treat me mean, because I can dodge those tomatoes pretty good. I've had a lot of practice.
In the meantime, you are the Assemblyman, and the session is over for the last half a year. That's your work is a half-year work in the Assembly. How did it go?
Well, it didn't go well. It was a status quo. You know,
status quo.
We did the same thing. There's one, status quo.
It's a good one, man.
We had the same processes that we've had before, and in fact, we've kind of regressed. You know, we had the two big guys, Mr. Skelos and Mr. Silver, who got in some serious trouble. Really, partially their fault, no question about it. They took an oath of office, but the system lends for that when rank and file members don't want to be real representatives. And Preet Bharara, as you know, said the two most important things they were able to do is have unbridled power, first of all, and a lack of oversight and transparency. We gave them an opportunity to take care of that unbridled power and take some back, change it to a real representative democracy instead of what seems to be a kingship right now, and have real oversight and the ability to get legislation through rank and file members to the floor for discussion, debate, and vote. And that was my Spirit of 76 piece of legislation.
Which I wrote about.
You did, and you were at the press conference, and you saw the support we had. And it's pretty much common sense.
My lead was, you know, when is 76 not half of 150?
That's right.
And it was when the Assembly does the counting.
Right, absolutely. And you know, it makes eminent sense to say if 76 individuals of the Assembly, or 32, which is a majority of the Senate, sponsor a piece of legislation, that's over 50% in both houses. That's a majority of representation of the 19.5 million people of New York State. We feel it should bypass the powerful leaders who right now can hold up every piece of legislation, or powerful committee people, and bring to the floor for discussion, debate, and a vote. We don't say it has to pass, but we say these important ethics bills should get to the floor. We did one ethic bill that we got through in terms of corruption. That was the pension bill, which, don't get me wrong, it's an important piece of legislation.
Pension forfeiture bill.
Pension revocation and forfeiture bill. Okay. You should not be able to keep your pension if you're convicted of a felony like Sheldon Silver or Dean Skelos was convicted. They're going to be sentenced. Why should they get taxpayers' dollars for the rest of their life?
They may not be sentenced.
Well,
did you read today?
I heard today that really has very little to do with their issues.
See, that's what I wasn't sure about.
Some of the top legal minds say their lawyers may have been using that, but it isn't really representative of the things they did.
As Rabbi Simon would tell me at this point, tell the audience what you're talking about. It's Governor Bob McDonnell from Virginia, former governor from Virginia, was involved with a theft for services, where he took money and he which benefited a certain company down in Virginia, and it was pay to play.
Yeah.
And now the U.S. Supreme Court ruled today that he was acquitted of that.
Because of his actions. Now, his actions were, he met with individuals on some of these things, and he was talking about specific issues as they related to government, and they had given him some rewards or some dinners and some luncheons, some things of that nature. What Sheldon Silver and Dean Skelos did, Dean Skelos made a deal with a business to give his son a job for an opportunity to get contracts. Sheldon Silver made a quid pro quo directly. We're going to give you money for this non-for-profit. You're going to give me the services back so I can take these clients in terms of asbestos and its negative impact on creating cancer, and I'm going to give it to these attorneys that I work with for legal work, and they will kick back to me. So that was a specific plan, basically.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe in the most, making very short for our audience, it's most like direct or indirect.
Right.
Indirect, you know, you do me a favor, and then down the line,
something happens.
Something happens, so that's indirect favor. But if you say, hey, do this for me and I'll do this for you, that's more direct, which would be our case in New York.
They had a lot of emails and letters, but for Skelos, they actually had telephone wire work. So they had the conversations.
Yeah, his son was saying, you know, that Preet Bharara might even be listening to this, and he was.
Sure. But we have several other pieces, and this is what I was starting to talk about at the beginning.
But I wanted to ask you, the pension forfeiture law, did that pass the Senate also?
Yeah, passed both houses.
So is the governor likely to sign it?
I believe he would be likely to sign it. I think it's suicide if he doesn't, because
right?
that's the one thing people want. But they want a lot of other things, too. They want term limits for these powerful leaders, because when you're there for 20 or 21 years, like Sheldon Silver was, you can consolidate power as a powerful leader, okay? Rank and file members don't have that particular power right now.
But you were a leader in the Republican side.
3 years.
And you were there 32 years or something like that.
Not as a leader, 3 years as a leader.
3 years as a leader, right, and then 34 years as a member.
Right.
Total, so.
Well, rank and file doesn't have the power that the leadership has.
But wouldn't you have term limited yourself, and wouldn't you have
yeah.
And then we wouldn't have had all those wonderful bills that you got passed and constitutional amendments and, you know, with the...
Well, I would term limit myself for 12 years, but that means the whole body has to be term limited. You can't term limit yourself individually.
But you wouldn't have had enough time to get that paper reduction bill through as a constitutional amendment.
But we would have got rid of a lot of guys that weren't doing the right thing. That's the problem with our system in New York State.
So, yeah.
You know, initially I was against term limits because that's a way of taking away the power of the people.
Right.
They should be able to decide. But when you won't make the other adjustments that are circular around that, then you have to have term limits, because it's not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, it's getting the bad babies out with the bathwater. So in New York State, until we make what I was getting to,
yes.
Not only term limits, LLC reform, where we don't know who is sponsoring this money, or they can give unbridled amounts of money. The particular bill of limiting bundling, you know what bundling is?
No,
for those who are watching don't know what bundling is. We have a certain level of how much we can receive as donations. Now, somebody who goes out and gets 500 people to give that level of donation in a check, then takes those $500 checks, or 500 checks with $4,000, let's say the limit, and gives it to a governor or a leader and says, well, I've only given you one check, but I went out and got 500 checks of $4,000, that person's going to have some extra special power. Even though he didn't give the money or she didn't,
right.
She went out and got the money. That's bundling. We have to limit, I think, how much of that can be done. And, of course, Pedro Espada never filed his election results of fundraising. Oh. And we have to have a penalty for that when that doesn't happen, because you don't know where they're getting the money from.
It's campaign finance.
Campaign finance filing. And we have a bill that says when you're warned 3 times, you have 30 days. If not, it becomes a misdemeanor, and you could actually go to jail for not filing that important information. And then I think we have to have recall in New York State. I really do think 20 other states have it. You know, my mom used to say to me when I misbehaved, Jimmy, I brought you into this world, I'll take you out of this world. The people of New York State have given us the honor to serve them. They brought us into this world. When they see they're dissatisfied, that we haven't lived up to our oath of office, that we look at their own dollars as their own personal piggy bank, they should have the right to go out and petition and take them out without waiting for this long process of going through the judiciary. They should have recall in New York State. It's very popular in the individuals I talk with.
Well, yeah, and California had recall.
Yep, 20 other states have recall.
Wow, so, you know, that would be a lot of reform. Now, if you get elected to the Senate, then you'll be hopefully maybe in the majority.
I hope so.
If you're in the majority, you'll still be as outspoken as you were in the Assembly?
I hope I will. That's what I'm there to be, to stand up for our constituents. You know, I had a long talk with Mr. Skelos before I decided, or not Mr. Flanagan, yes. Before I decided to run for this position.
Okay.
And I sat down, I said, you know Jim Tedisco, he's independent, he's going to vote the way he thinks. I respect you, but you won't tell me how to vote. The conference won't tell me how to vote. When I get back to my constituents and listen to them in Herkimer, Fulton, Hamilton County, Schenectady, and Saratoga, that would guide me how to vote. And if that's a problem for you, I'll shake hands right now. I'll walk out of the room. This is exactly what I said to him. He shook my hand. He said, I know Jim Tedisco. I know he's an independent, and I want to prove to you I'll be a good leader for the entire state. I said, that'll remain to be seen on both sides, but I decided to run after that because...
But that didn't say that he would let you be independent.
No, but he knows where I stand.
Well,
Yeah.
he was a member in the Assembly, Republican Conference in the Assembly, when you were leader, maybe, or?
No, he left
No,
before that.
Before that, okay.
Yeah.
So he
Charlie
knows-
Nesbitt was his leader when he was there.
So you know you know each other as colleagues in the
Oh,
same
yeah.
conference.
He's very bright.
So-
He's very personal. I think he could be a great leader, but
No,
he has
but
to.
I'm just saying, that's how he knows you, and not just in passing or seeing your name in a newspaper.
Oh, yes.
The two of you were in the same conference and discussing legislation at the same time, and, you know, he knows your personality
Yeah.
very well.
Sure.
So-
Well, like you said, he knows I'm outspoken.
Okay.
And, I told him this. I said, look, some things are going to change. I'll be in a different venue. I'll be in the Senate. Have a different district. I'll have more constituents to serve. But I said one thing won't change, and that's Jim Tedisco. I'll always stand up for only one group, and those are the people that gave me the honor to serve them in whatever capacity they put me in, whether it was the Assembly or the Senate. And by the way, the 49th Senatorial District, as you know, is beautiful territory, some of it very rural, the Adirondacks, but we also have the city and county of Schenectady and Saratoga. And basically, all of my Assembly District, Ballston, Charlton, Milton, Galway, Providence,
Well,
Clifton Park.
All those communities are listed on the final panel of the show.
There you go.
I did that for you.
Edinburgh, Hadley, and Day, you know them all. In several towns and villages up in Herkimer, Fulton, and Hamilton County. Now, you know Hamilton County is the second largest, no, the first largest
Land-wise.
land-wise in the state. First or second, it's
Well,
very
I think
close.
St. Lawrence County might be
Yeah,
larger.
or
but-
out west where Senator Young could be. But you know what the population is of
Right.
Hamilton County?
5,000.
4,500 to 5,000
Yeah, yeah.
constituents.
And they're all in the southern part of the county.
Right.
Mostly.
That's
But
the
they're-
Adirondack Forest? I mean,
It's the beginning of the Adirondack
Well, you got
Park.
Long Lake, Indian Lake, and it goes
most of
beautiful
the-
territory,
but
beautiful
the-
Adirondacks.
But the Hamilton County triples in size or quadruples in size in the summer months.
Oh, yes,
Because
tourism.
of all the tourism.
Tourism is big. They got
So-
snowmobiling out there, a lot of
Yeah.
water sports, fishing, hunting.
So, but most of the year-round population is in the southern part, the southern third of the district, of the county.
Right.
It's a very long county that looks
Yeah.
like a finger going up. So,
Starts with Fulton, goes up to Hamilton, then you got Herkimer. But great territory. I love being out there. 2.5-hour ride out to the edge of it. A lot of gasoline.
Well,
I think I spent more gas in 7 weeks than I had for a whole year.
and here you go, you're going into a district that's 3 times the size of your assembly district, and you're getting paid the same amount of money,
really, the Senate gets the same
Yeah.
as much as the Assembly?
79.5.
I didn't know that. I thought they
So-
got more.
Well, you've got to love what you do. You know, I also had a talk with my wife.
Yeah, I'm sure
And
you
when I
did.
talked with my wife, she looked at me and she said, let me get this straight. You're out of the house half the time right now. This district you have is 5 times
Oh.
bigger than your present assembly district. Are you ever going to come home again? And I told a little joke, which I shouldn't do. You shouldn't do this with your wife. I said, well, I'll give you 45 minutes a day, dear. The smoke start coming out of her
Yeah.
ear. So you know what she said to me? 45 minutes, you can mow the front lawn, then you can leave again, she said to me. So it took me 24 roses to get that straightened out with
got
her.
you, yeah, for
But
sure.
finally, after our discussion, she said, you love being a representative, don't you? You love going
And she
standing
knew
up.
that when she married you.
Yeah, standing up up to the most powerful elements in state government. You know, Elliot Spitzer, he was an effing steamroller. He was going to roll over me and everybody that got in his way. I said, no, you're not. We love immigration in this nation, in this state. That's the hallmark of what built this great country. It's diversity. Our grandfathers, great-grandfathers came here, helped build it.
Legal immigration.
Legal immigration. That's the
Right.
point. And I said, no citizen who breaks the law expects to be rewarded for it. So there's a process for this. And we want to build it and make it greater. And so that was the argument we had. And then with Sheldon Silver, as you know,
Yeah.
I walked right up to him in his own press conference and said, look, we need to talk about the property and property taxes. It's too high in this state. And he goes, well, this is my room. I said, no, it's a public's room. And I said, you also think that the public's tax dollars is your own personal piggy bank. And I authored the first property tax cap to get our foot in the door.
What did he say to that?
He,
Yeah, I was
he
wondering
was,
And how
about
long
some-
ago was that?
oh, that's on tape. Go to my website and you'll see it.
Does it
We're
say it?
using that for commercials right now.
Oh, really?
Because a lot of guys talk the talk.
Yeah,
They
don't
put
walk
out
the
press
walk.
releases and
Yeah.
things like that. I like to go face to people, face to face.
No, I know that.
I didn't go up to him when he was handcuffed behind his back in front of a judge He was the most powerful leader we had there.
Yes.
He was on the border of being the longest tenured speaker in the history of New York State.
And you know who he would have succeeded? If
Oswald D. Heck.
From Schenectady.
From Schenectady.
You know,
there were two leaders from Schenectady in the history. I was the minority leader, and Oswald D. Heck was the majority leader for speaker for 20 years. Right. He has the record.
That's
and
right.
Knock on
and
wood.
Silver was shy maybe about a year or so. Or
yeah, he just missed it. Yeah. He'll have the longest tenured in the
Democrat
prison commissary when he gets
there. Jim, how old are you now?
I'll be 66 coming up.
66.
Yeah.
So, you know, you could, I mean, Hugh Farley is in his 80s. You could be in the Senate in another 20 years.
Well, I wouldn't do that, you know. Another way I feel about it, from the very first day I got elected to this morning when I woke up, I've got that churning in my stomach, ready to stand up. You never know what you're going to have to battle against to protect the quality of life of the people you represent. And that's what a representative is, ready to do battle, but also ready to support, sponsor, on a bipartisan way, anything that's good for your constituents. I think I told you about the time Mario Cuomo, I called up his office when I was chairman of a task force on missing children. I had an idea, and I said, I'd like to make our transportation system, the state thruway, the first transportation system in the state to help track down missing children. Put their pictures on thruway toll tickets. And I told you, about 2 hours, they gave me a call. The very next day, they said, meet the governor on exit 23. We're going to print the first pictures of a missing child, and we're going to put them on the thruway toll tickets. I'll be a son of a gun. He showed up. We went in the booth. I've got pictures of him and me. It was in the newspaper and everything. And I said, Governor, why did you come? And he said, I'm from a different party. I'm a young legislator. He said, because it's the character, the content, and the quality of an idea. And this was a good idea. And we found the first child in Buffalo, we found her, that we put on that picture of missing children. And he also said something else, I'll never forget it. He said, we're going to have a press conference. You know why? I said, why? Because if a politician doesn't blow his own horn,
no one else will.
There's never any music, he said.
There's never any music. Okay.
But I took that to mean, and when you're in the minority especially, you've got to get the facts out. You've got to stand up. You've got to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and you've got to make the case. And I made the case, as you know, about that Proposition 2 to go digital. That was unprecedented, that a minority member of any body out there could work through for 2 successive sessions, get that Proposition 2 passed. For those who are listening, that was on the ballot to go digital and put those tablets on our table and take all that paper off there, be more efficient, save $13 million. I got Denny Field to admit it was $13 million in paper, and keep that ink-filled paper out of landfills and keep our trees standing. Do you know what they call those tablets now on our desk?
Tedisco tablets?
Jimmy's.
Jimmy's?
Yep.
Okay.
You raise your hand, hey, my Jimmy's not.
Interesting. You know, you're a Republican, we all know, and you know, the aura that you get Republican, and you're stagnant and you don't care about the environment. I guess it's just the opposite. And you're just the opposite of that. I know that you care about animal rights, and here you're talking about, you know, the saving trees. So I guess it's a bad rap that I mean, especially you would be getting.
Well,
I mean, I don't know if you're a liberal, but those are liberal issues that.
Not a liberal.
I don't think
I know you're not a liberal.
I'm not a liberal. I don't think you can be pigeonholed if you're doing the right thing. Some things are just good for everybody, whether you're a liberal or conservative, Republican or Democrat, no matter what you are. And I like to see if an issue is good for the majority of my constituents. And if it is, I never ask one of my constituents if they call my office, what's your affiliation, so I could help you as an ombudsman. And I think we're representatives. We have to represent everybody. And you talked about animal issues. We had our 6th Animal Advocacy Day.
Yeah, I know. Before you get into that for a second, I just, I don't want to take anything credit away from you, because you did bring up that, you know, the computers and all that, but didn't the Democrat have to carry that legislation?
Oh yeah, we have no pride of authorship.
So who was the Democrat who actually carried
I believe it was Galef. Yeah.
Sandy Galef, who we had on the show. She was part of the coup of Shelley Silver. In 2000. Yeah. So she wasn't exactly, but she carried the bill.
Well, the coup took a little while. You know, everybody was defending him for a couple weeks until they started to stab him in the back. When they saw he was going over the cliff, you know, there's not much loyalty amongst thieves over there. You know what I mean? But yeah, you know, listen, what kids would get thrown out of Union College when I was going there for plagiarism is an accepted practice in New York State. But I don't have a pride of authorship. I can give you a litany of lists of ideas I put forth, put other people's names on it. But you know what? when it comes to Buster's Law for animal cruelty, making it a felony, Proposition 2, stopping the Thruway Authority from a 45% trucking toll increase.
Right.
You know what that would have meant? Every time you go to the grocery store, the cost of an orange, a tomato, your municipal roadways would be ruined because they jump off the thruway and start driving through municipal roadways. They wouldn't have a hearing in the Capital District. I stood up to the leaders over there and said, you won't have a hearing? I'll have my own hearing. I had all the business groups in, the citizenry in, for the good taxpayer groups. Governor Cuomo said, rescind that 45, and he fired all the executives. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I did.
Fired all the executives in the thruway because he said that is a pass-through 45%. We promised the constituents, and this is another thing that upsets me. When they built that thruway, by the end of the 1990s, no more tolls, it's going to be free.
86.
Yeah.
56 to 86, a 30-year bond.
Oh, is that what it was? I
Yeah.
thought it was into
and
the...
Moynihan was the one who I remember saying we should have the tolls off in 1986.
Right. Well, we made a promise that we'd do it.
And they didn't.
And when the government doesn't follow through with their promises, that's bad. That's why we've lost a lot of faith. And that's the one thing why this ethics and this corruption thing is so important. They have a tendency to paint everybody with a broad brush. And that's why we've got to stand up, rank and file members, and have a revolt. I call it the spirit of 76 revolt. Yep. 76 members. It should be both sides of the... And by the way, at the end of the night here, when we went back to the bad old days of this budget, 5:15 a.m. in the morning, we did this bill. Where the public wasn't around, the Fourth Estate, the media wasn't around, legislators weren't around because they were sleeping on chairs.
They were. We saw pictures. Yeah.
I was one of the first, only ones with a few other guys who stayed awake. I took a lot of no-dos to make sure I could try to read the bills. But by the way, if they don't let you read the bill, why would a representative vote for or against the bill if they don't let them read it? I know you can't vote for it. And these messages of necessity, they're messages of political expediency. You shouldn't pass a $150 billion budget with a message of necessity, which puts aside the 3-day waiting period that our founding fathers put in place. They put it in there for a reason, so you could read the bills. And, you know, I appreciate anybody who wants to jump into the field of public service, and even Nancy Pelosi. But Nancy Pelosi was wrong when she said you have to pass the bill to know what's in the bill. A multi-billion-dollar health care bill, you have to pass it to find out. No, that was a wrong statement. You have to read the bill. You have to debate the bill. You have to be a real representative. And that's why my colleagues are more lemmings going over a cliff than really embracing that spirit of 76, that revolution, which I think you're seeing taxpayers involved with right now, the way this presidential thing is going. They're not happy with either one of the candidates, and I don't blame them. The negatives for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are about as high as the final game of the combined scores of the NBA championship, okay? And that's unprecedented to see that much negative. And you saw what happened in England recently.
I want to get back to animals, but do you have a preference, speaking of animals, between Clinton or Trump? Or?
Well, let me put it this way. When I walked in to vote, I asked if I could do a write-in and put my name in. Okay.
Would you vote Libertarian for Governor Johnson?
I don't think I would do that because that would probably give us 4 more years of Barack Obama, and I don't think we can withstand
Really?
4 more years.
Don't we need a third party?
No, because what a third party will give is just, you can't win in a third party. All you can do is take votes maybe from one or the other major candidates. I think what we need is real people in the 2 major parties. I'm not opposed to other parties being involved, but they have to really represent their constituents, and that's what the offensiveness is right now. You've got both sides who don't seem to want to follow. You saw it in England recently.
Yeah, well,
where they got out of the union there. They decided, we want to take our country back. Either solve the problem of immigration, do it right, provide legal immigration, and that's great if they do, because we love more cultural help here, more diversity. But you've got to do it right. We're in a state right now where people don't want to just kill us, these terrorists, or blow up our buildings. They want to destroy the concept of what America is all about, its foundation. They want to destroy freedom and liberty. When you see this individual who walked in that LGBT bar and killed
in Orlando,
50 individuals and hurt 50. Yes, they probably were opposed, homophobic in nature, I think so, but they also wanted to kill Americans. But they wanted to send us a message, and that message is, you better be afraid. What did Benjamin Franklin say? If you give up your liberty for security, you lose both your liberty and security. If because of those murders that took place, we relinquish well, let me see if I got it here. Oh yeah, This is the Constitution. I always carry this with me to remind me that every piece of legislation has to relate to protecting our freedoms and liberties. If we give up the freedom and liberties here for our security, you know what they're going to do next time? Kill 100 people. They're going to say, it works. The more we kill, the more we blow up, the more we involve freedom and liberty and destroy it. No, we've got to keep our freedoms and liberties. We've got to make sure we protect this as best I can. But they win if we show them that we're going to walk into people's houses without a writ or without a judge giving us a license to do that. If we put people on lists, if we follow them around and spy, that's not America. And if they're able to change America and its freedoms and liberties, that's a very bad thing.
Okay, so I got to, because I don't want to ignore the animal part.
Oh, that's very important.
Are you still going to have animal advocacy? Because you were the head of it.
Absolutely.
So but the Senate really didn't seem to have a role in the
we've
animal
got Phil
advocacy.
Boyle and
Phil Boyle, that's right.
Serino is there.
Sue Serino?
Sue Serino.
Okay.
And probably the three of us, and we get 3 people from the Assembly.
Now,
and then we'll have the 7th Annual Animal Advocacy Day. And what's the importance of that? We have to be representatives for the most powerful voices, those who have very little voices, and those who have no voices, but they're important to protect. They have barks, right, and meows. And the fact of the matter is that most people understand that's a bridge crime. When people hurt animals, it's on the FBI list as an A-level indicator that they're going to go on to hurt human beings. Son of Sam, Ted Bundy, Dahmer, the Columbine kids. I wouldn't be surprised if this kooky guy who did these terrible murders recently had a whole history. Go on to hurt people. They're the serial murderers. So it's very important to get these people off the streets, maybe provide some psychological evaluation treatment, but we have a great bill we got to get passed next year. That's the statewide registry. Because if they're convicted of this, they go on that registry. Look, it's not a part of our Constitution that you have a right to own an animal or abuse it. It's a privilege to own an animal. They give us unconditional love. Look at the service they do in our canine units for law enforcement. They're great service dogs. They go into nursing homes. They help the blind.
And now they could be buddies with diabetes, children with diabetes, because they could sniff. They could indicate when the blood sugar levels are high.
Yes.
Yeah, and
low on insulin. It gives off a certain scent from your body when you need some insulin. And they several children have been saved. I talked to several parents about that. Yeah.
And why? And now we had a retiring assemblyman, Steve Katz, on the program.
Yeah.
You know, now you would think someone with that last name would definitely be at the animal.
Well, he is a veterinarian.
And he's a veterinarian. But why? He says he's never been invited, and he says, because I asked him about
to Animal Advocacy Day.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody's invited.
Well, he was very upset that he feels that he was never really offered the invitation to be at Animal Advocacy Day, right, Rabbi? He was on the show. He was talking about that. He was very.
Maybe he wanted to be a speaker.
Maybe he wanted to be a frontliner. If you want to be a frontliner, it doesn't make any difference if you're a veterinarian or not. You got to sponsor bills. You got to stand up for them. You got to speak out for them. It's not a question of just making money off them. You know.
Now he's got marijuana for dogs.
Well,
pets. Marijuana.
He had marijuana for cars too when he was in a car with one, but that's a different story. But he's a good guy. I enjoy him, and he worked hard.
But anyway, I just thought I'd ask you because when people see his show, I wanted them to get a reply from you.
Well, he was invited. Everybody was invited. In fact, if he wanted to speak, he could have asked me. I would have let him speak. As a veterinarian, I'm sure he would have a lot to offer.
Okay, it's his loss. Yeah. Okay, so you have other legislation that's really...
The last few minutes.
Okay. You relate to the penalty for offense of predatory sexual assault against a child.
Yes.
What bill is that about? What's that about?
That's a piece of legislation. One of the bills, which is a co-bill with that, is the bullying bill we have.
Right.
And what that says, if there's any bullying of a sexual nature in a school, a physical nature, an emotional nature, the parents have to be notified. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. Under the Dignity for All Students Act, there's nothing in that bill that says if anybody's child is bullied in a school, that the principal, the administrator, has to call the parents and let them know that this has happened with their kids. Now, you may have seen recently out here in the Capitol Region, a child just committed suicide. I think a 14-year-old child was bullied. Parents never knew the extent that he was bullied. In fact, it was in the front page of the Times-Union. He wrote a suicide note that I can't take it anymore. I can't stand up for this. Now, I believe I could be in a room with the 19.5 million people in New York State, and every parent, if I said, would you like to know if your child is being bullied in any way in school?
Absolutely.
Raise your hand if you wouldn't, or raise your hand if you would ask that question. I don't think anybody would raise their hand and say, no, I don't want to know if my child is being bullied in school. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Why should I allow and believe a principal or vice principal or school administration?
Who's opposing your bill?
Mr. Donnelly. Assemblyman Donnelly, yeah.
O'Donnell?
O'Donnell, yeah. Because he's the head of corrections, and he carried the original bill. And his point of view is that, well, it may be related to homosexuality or lesbianism, and they may be being abused of that, and their parents should know about that. Well, if their parents should know about it.
Because they're not out yet.
Yeah, if their parents should know about that, well, why would you think the vice principal would be better at dealing with that? Who's to say he's more open to these type of things?
Interesting.
You know, and it's also discriminatory against heterosexual kids. Because, okay, if that's a point of concern for parents of those type of kids who have that particular sexual orientation, it doesn't reflect anything about heterosexual kids and their abuse, so they should at least be reported because that issue doesn't stand for them. But to not report to any parents, and I think at some point you have to trust the parents.
You said that Danny O'Donnell carried the original bill.
Yeah.
So now when you go to the Senate, can you co-sponsor a compromise bill with him? Wouldn't that be something?
I'm trying to do that now with him.
But wouldn't that be something? All of a sudden, you get your opponent.
Yeah, I showed him the issue on the front page. He goes, "I'll research this. I'll look." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I think it's important to let parents know when this happens."
Well, go for it.
Well, we'll do
All
it.
right,
Keep the good
thank
fight
you.
up. Go ahead.
Assemblyman, as it is now, Assemblyman Tedisco, thank you for being on the
Rabbi, my pleasure.
View, and we wish you a lot of success with good health in the future.
Continued success.
Well, we hope we get to the Senate. And one more thing why it's
No, we're
important.
done.
Oh, we're out.